Parents, guardians, supporters need to be outraged.
Obviously, we have to have unbelievable urgency to it's not acceptable where we are.
We're asking for the resignation of this individual, this state superintendent.
I think the toxicity of his leadership and the fact that so many people are leaving the education system is a good indicator that he's not the right person for the child.
The state education department is instituting a cover-up of what's going on in public schools. Is that outrage?
This is a Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall. Crisis in the Classroom.
Good evening, and welcome to the latest installment of our Crisis in the Classroom Town Hall series. Today, we're in Baltimore, Maryland, home to one of the most troubled school districts in our nation. Project Baltimore, the education franchise for Fox 45 News, has been investigating the school system here in Baltimore for over 6 years. What they found and the scandals they brought to light will leave you speechless. Here's Chris Papps with Project Baltimore's latest report.
When it comes to the most recent Maryland state test scores,
I can't tell you how horrible that is.
There's a consensus.
Parents, guardians, supporters need to be outraged.
What Project Baltimore discovered in these unredacted test results is a problem.
Do you find it acceptable that there's 13 high schools in Baltimore City with no students proficient in math?
No.
At 13 Baltimore City high schools, not a single student who took the 2023 math exam in the spring scored proficient. Not one.
It's sad and it's disheartening because today, more than ever, the school system has the money and the resources.
We obviously are not doing enough.
This is when people get fired.
Project Baltimore made the discovery after a source gave us the unredacted test scores for every school in Baltimore City. The data has not yet been released to the public, but we didn't just find 13 city high schools with 0 students who tested proficient in math. We also looked at the city's top schools, and what we discovered there may be just as alarming. According to the state test results, these are Baltimore's 5 top performing high schools in terms of math proficiency. At these schools, a combined 809 students took the state math test in the spring. 92 students tested proficient, meaning a total of about 11% of students are proficient in math at the best high schools in Baltimore. When Maryland public school students take the state test, their scores place them in one of 4 categories. Level 1 is beginning, all the way up to level 4, distinguished. Of the 92 students who tested proficient in math at the 5 best Baltimore City high schools, all 92 tested into level 3. There were no level 4s. In fact, there was not one high school student in the entire city in math who achieved the highest level of proficiency. City School CEO Dr. Sonia Santelises last year earned $445,000 in total compensation.
And I will just continue to say,
of Maryland's 24 public school systems, she's the highest earning leader. And since 2016, she's been leading the state's lowest performing district.
If I were mayor right now...
Sheila Dixon, a Democrat candidate for mayor of Baltimore, says she's seen enough. She has already called for the CEO of City Schools to resign. Tuesday morning, she appeared on Fox 45 News, calling for more accountability.
We've got to have answers, and we can't just get a press release from the school system saying that we're working on it.
City schools will not do an interview with Fox 45 to give the public answers. But the district did explain in a statement that in 7 of 8 grade levels, math proficiencies in spring 2023 did increase from the previous year. The statement went on to say, "We acknowledge that some of our high school students continue to experience challenges in math, following the pandemic.
One singular person is never the solution or the single problem.
While some city leaders are calling for Santelises to resign, others, like State Senate President Bill Ferguson, are standing by her.
I have a great deal of faith in Dr. Santelises. She is incredibly thoughtful.
Ferguson told Fox 45 that education is a continuum, and he doesn't hold any one person accountable because he says if a student is not performing in high school, that likely means the student didn't receive enough support in elementary or middle school. But it's worth pointing out Dr. Santelises was in charge of city schools when these high school students were in elementary school. She's now been the CEO for more than 7 years. A 10th grader today was in 3rd grade when she took over.
Obviously, we have to have unbelievable urgency it's not acceptable where we are, but that doesn't mean that the entire system is broken.
We need to hold the school CEO and the administration accountable.
I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore.
Let us welcome our very distinguished panel. Former Governor Bob Ehrlich is a longtime proponent of educational reform here in Maryland and pushed for more school choice during his time in Annapolis. Bianca Tapawasco was COE, is a mom and a former Baltimore teacher, now representing the Ashland Community Development Corporation. Shannon Wright is a former mayoral candidate here in Baltimore who previously helped lead a local NAACP chapter, and General John Tykirk, a retired U.S. Air Force general who is now running for the U.S. Senate here in Maryland. Thank you for joining us. Let's get started. What is there to have faith in, Governor, when the results are just not there? What is there to defend, according to Senator Bill Ferguson?
Not much. Here's the problem. These numbers are egregious. Your story is egregious. But we could go back 5, 10, 15, 20 years and run similar stories. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. I've been on similar panels with some folks on this panel. We can talk all we want about the CEO, and Sheila Dixon, good for her. I love what she's saying. She's absolutely right, accountability. But there's never been accountability. There's never been the political will to achieve accountability. The politics isn't there to get to accountability. And most of all, there hasn't been a movement, a parent movement, from the street to Annapolis or City Hall, quite frankly, that demands more accountability. It's a monopoly town politically, and as a result, there's a lot of talk, and talk is cheap, as we know, but when it comes right down to it, these kids have been deprived of their constitutional rights for generations, and nobody cares enough. Not enough people care enough. Some people do, but not enough.
You know, General Tykirk, you're a newcomer to the political scene. You've seen what Project Baltimore has exposed in Baltimore City regarding grade changing, ghost students' performance, et cetera. What changes would you like to see made in the leadership and accountability in Baltimore City schools? And though Governor Ehrlich says it happens in the past, it will continue to happen, are we saying that people in leadership just don't care if these kids are uneducated and they find themselves in a life of crime?
Armstrong, this is a long-term systemic crisis. The system is broken. Mm-hmm. And when you see systems that actually work in the educational realm, they have a combination of factors. They have high standards, they have accountability, and they have local control. And in this case in Baltimore, we have none of those things. And the result is that we have students and families that are deprived of the American dream because the education system systemically is failing them.
So Bianca, so it continues to be business as usual? There's no one who has the backbone to make this change? And what does it take? What does that backbone look like?
Well, first of all, I knew something was wrong back in 2010 when my now senior at Merville was a preschooler. And I got one report. There was one highlighted field in yellow. And I said, what does this mean? They said there was only one class, not a grade, in that pre-K to 8th grade school that was proficient. So I joined the PTO, started teaching parents to help with homework. Being bilingual, I began to tutor some children. And like Governor said, there's just not enough people. It's not that I'm out there But I was there and even was employed up to October 5th was my last day at the most recent school where I worked. But what is happening is we don't have a coalition that can say, not, protests, not the signs, not the just being on camera, but see, the easy thing is dropping kids to school. The hard part is the math boosters on the weekend, staying long enough in the evening to get the work done. But we don't have enough parents that even got the education. I'm 52, and there's some grandparents, not much older than me, that didn't get the education. So we can't ask parents to read to a child when they themselves did not get what they needed. So we need a coalition, like Governor said, a coalition. We're talking about 400, 500, to grow to the thousands that we can, like a deputy, just what can we do? And because the community is going to be able to solve this problem, not 200 East North Avenue.
You can have all the coalitions in the world, but they cannot be in the home with those kids when there's parents are there one-on-one teaching them the basics. Pastor Wright, leaders from all across the political aisle, including civil rights attorney Ben Crump, have come here to Baltimore and talked about how the failed educational system has created a school-to-prison pipeline. And if we can't fix the schools, how can we ever hope to fix crime? And how can we ever hope to give these kids real self-esteem, real self-worth? Who's fighting for them?
We can't unless you fix that. It's a known fact that 8th grade proficiency tests are used to predict the amount of prison cells that need to be ready, so that you have that express lane right there. So one of the problems, there are several levels of problems here in Baltimore. One of the problems we have is leadership. And good leadership understands that there are things you're supposed to do, things that you should do, things that you probably shouldn't do, but need to do. And the leadership that we've had in this city for quite some time has done what they needed to do to stay in leadership, and very little more. I understand that there are some folks now that are out here and talking because they've declared they're running about how bad the education system is, but if you look back to their first term, it was just as bad then. So we have to be really careful about the sound bites that we allow to take in as fact.
Who are you referring to?
Well, Ms. Dixon. The schools weren't any better, any different when she was mayor. We have to be really careful about taking in sound bites. This city needs to move forward. We need leadership that understands this is where we need to be and this is how we get there.
So what does that leadership look like? Where is it? Are there people that are you recommending that can make the change?
No one I've seen so far.
So then there's nobody.
Declared so far.
So Governor Ehrlich, you heard Senate President Bill Ferguson say he doesn't hold any one person accountable for the struggling school system, not any one person, but schools CEO, Dr. Sandra Santeliza, has held her position since high schoolers were in elementary school. What's your take on that? Do you think the school system needs new leadership? And was it any different? Did you have any real power when you were governor? Would you be able to sleep at night with these kinds of results?
I couldn't sleep because we received similar numbers to these. And one day, Nancy Grasmick, state superintendent, came to me and said, you know what, under No Child Left Behind, we can do certain things. It's early in the school choice movement. We can close, we can go charter, we can go public charter, we can go residential charter. We can do some things to get these kids their constitutional rights. And I was told to pound sand by the Democrats in the legislature, and it went nowhere. Because you've heard all of us say the same thing in different ways. And for everybody watching, it's so frustrating. The answer to your previous question, though, is really the question is, you can talk accountability, yes, and there's no accountability. It's a joke. We all know that. But here's the bottom line. The bottom line is parents showing up at PTA meetings and demanding accountability with respect to that school and that classroom and that week and those results. And without that, you can talk about all the politics and all the commercials and he said, she said, who shot. It doesn't matter. Without that, in this city and other cities, other jurisdictions, not just cities, that's where education gets done. That's where accountability gets done. And without it, our future's bleak.
You know, Bianca, in studying your background, you decided to pull your children out of the Baltimore City public school system to homeschool them. What do you think the importance of school choice is for parents who may not be able to homeschool their students?
There's no parent that cannot homeschool their children. It's just not true.
Even for those that you said that cannot read and do basic math, how can they homeschool their kids if they don't have the basic skills?
Well, we have 700 nonprofits in Baltimore City. Where are they? Where are they?
So tell the parents, if they can't do it themselves, how do they access these tools that help them give their children the best chance at a quality education?
Okay, that falls under the School Board of Commissioners. They are there to hold this CEO accountable. You don't hear from them. I hear from one because I reach out and I email, but they're not out there letting people know who they are, what they do, what they can do. They're supposed to be implementing the world-class education that we all claim that we are being offered. So when it comes to the homeschooling or the choice of homeschooling or even school choice, which is actually something that I am not so quick to just say school choice, because what does that even look like? School choice for someone that can't afford to survive is not a choice at all. Not everybody can choose even a school according to their address. I live on the even side of the street. There's a school on the corner, but because I live on the even side, I need to go 9 blocks away. That's not a choice either. What I'm saying to you is, though, that when it comes to educating our children, it must start with being the parent who is going to demand the change that we want in our own house. But unfortunately, parents have been cheated. So how do we reach them? Through these types of forums to let them know who is at power, what they can do to show up, and also, we have a school system that we pay into, but homeschoolers cannot have co-ops. There's no talk about co-ops or cooperatives that can teach children together in a setting. Some of the best teachers are actually homeschooling now, but it's reaching the parents, and there's too few people that know how things work, and too large of a number of people that did not get what they received.
I don't think we should ever contemplate that failure is becoming the new standard in high school education. I don't think that's where we are, because if we fail these kids, you don't have to worry about sexual trafficking and crime and homicide and petty theft, because they really have no real skills, and what they're doing is playing out, trying to make a living at the expense of your life and your neighborhood. And this has to change. I mean, we're going to come back, because you cannot continue to do this and expect different results. The results are only going to get worse.
There cannot continue to be scandal after scandal after scandal.
Maryland has a new interim superintendent of schools after Mohammed Chaudhry stepped down in the face of controversy. We're examining the recent questions about transparency within the State Department of Education right after this.
Tough to be a parent to witness this, because you feel like you send your kids to school so they can get the education. Now they're not getting it, and the leaders of the community are giving up and moving on to better opportunities, right? But what does that mean for the kids? They're stuck.
Mohammed Chaudhry is no longer the Maryland State Superintendent of Schools. He stepped down last month after reporting from Fox 45 News Project Baltimore exposed some major transparency concerns within the State Department of Education. Take a look.
Mr. Superintendent, have you ever used the Signal application in commission of your job?
I have no comment. Thank you much. Appreciate it. For my job?
Well,
Project Baltimore last week first showed you that video.
You've never used Signal for your job?
Thank you.
State Superintendent Mohammed Chaudhry denying he used an encrypted messaging app for work. But we obtained screenshots showing he used the Signal app to communicate with high-level employees at the Maryland State Department of Education. The Signal app allows users to enable a setting to automatically delete messages. And some of the screenshots we obtained, like this one, appear to show Chaudhry berating an employee, which supports allegations that the state superintendent created a toxic workplace culture. But this was not the first time Chaudhary came under fire.
There cannot continue to be scandal after scandal after scandal.
Project Baltimore also reported how Chaudhary used a secondary email account to conduct state business, and that his state-issued cell phone was set to auto-delete text messages after 30 days. 12 of Chaudhary's text messages were deleted after Fox 45 filed a public records request to obtain them, a potential violation of state law.
And it's dishonest. It's hiding the ball. It's hiding the truth from parents.
I am revamping the template.
Our investigation into the state superintendent started months ago when we analyzed state test results and found 23 Baltimore City schools where 0 students among those tested scored proficient in math. Shortly after we reported those results, the Maryland State Department of Education took the test scores off its website, heavily redacted them, and then reposted them. A move that kept parents and taxpayers from seeing how poorly some schools are performing.
Mr. Chaudhary.
That decision by MSDE sparked backlash. But when we tried to question Chaudhary about it,
Scores on the website.
he locked himself behind a door.
We're asking for the resignation of this individual, this state superintendent.
This week, in light of all of Project Baltimore's findings, 3 Republican lawmakers took a strong stance, calling on Chaudhary to resign immediately.
This I pondered for months, taking this stand, but we need, because of our children.
I think the toxicity of his leadership and the fact that so many people are leaving the education system is a good indicator that he's not the right person for the job.
In the wake of Fox 45's findings, the Attorney General, State Prosecutor, and Inspector General for Education had all been called on by lawmakers and special interest groups to launch investigations into the superintendent's actions. And with time running out before the state board was set to make a decision, Governor Wes Moore, a Democrat, also came out strong this week when asked about Project Baltimore's reporting.
I want transparency, I want accountability, and I want a superintendent that believes in it and can deliver it.
Moore, who has repeatedly said he has no control over the state school board's decision to offer the superintendent another contract,
As well as
did have a strong opinion on Chaudhary's performance.
The results we're seeing right now are not satisfactory results, and I demand better, and we need to make sure that we're getting better results for our kids.
Now, just 5 days after the governor said he demands better, Chaudhary announced he will withdraw his request for a second contract as superintendent.
6% of the students were...
Project Baltimore has reached out to the state school board, asking when parents and taxpayers can expect more transparency. The transparency the governor and other lawmakers demanded. And we're asking whether MSDE will reverse course on its decision from earlier this year to heavily redact state test scores. As we receive updates, we'll pass them on to you. I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore.
You know, Bianca, we just heard Project Baltimore's report about Mohammed Chaudhary resigning. Why does it seem some leaders would rather leave their job than be transparent?
Well, one reason is that when people are not prioritized, this is really what's been happening. People are not prioritized. This is again, you have a CEO earning hundreds of thousands, another one earning, that's $500,000 that taxpayers are paying. See, they're in their comfortable positions while we continue to see this happen again and again, where they are far removed from the parent who's struggling, the parent who didn't get, or the parent who has a child who's not going to ever get.
And nor do they have their kids in the school system.
Well, I understand that the CEO mentioned that her daughter is in the school system, but being in a school system and being supported are 2 different things.
You know, Governor, in 2003, 80% of 9th graders were not graduating. And you had a chance to watch Governor Wes Moore in office for almost a year. Give us your report card on how he's doing as it pertains to the public schools and education. But let me just also say this. If Governor Wes Moore had not intervened, Chaudhary would be superintendent today, and Chaudhary was appointed by Hogan. and was a leftover, not by the city
I'm not going to get
governor.
into politics. I don't care. And you know what? We had Nancy Grasmick, one of the best in the world. And this is great journalism, terrific. And the exposure here was true. But this problem is so much bigger than that.
But why? Why? When you go back to 2003, 80% of ninth graders were not graduating?
And it was not discussed at the city council, and it was not discussed in the state legislature, and in a single party state, Democratic Party, which runs everything, there wasn't enough momentum or care or enthusiasm or belief in the constitutional rights of these children to do anything. And if you hear the emotion in my voice, I lived it and saw it and lost friends at the time. And here we are 20 years later, 17 years later, it hasn't changed at all. So great reporting, but without parents showing up, city council meetings, going to Annapolis, saying, we demand this school, that school, this school, my kid, this test. It ain't happening.
You know, Shannon, you ran for mayor in the last election cycle. You vowed to push for a major overhaul of the school system. If you won, as we know, if you had Brandon Scott ended up winning, talk about why is it that the mayor of this city can't change the educational system? And you said, I heard Sheila Dixon in a package say she would fire Sandalista without question, because she's not earned the right to continue teaching these kids when you look at the dismal results. Why is it? Are they so in bed together that they're willing to sacrifice these kids?
So when I heard Ms. Dixon say she would fire Sandalista, but again, during her time as mayor, the schools were not improved any from where they are today. So let's understand where that comes
no one
from.
has improved them.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, and then you look at the mayor and you say that he can't. It's not that he can't, it's that he won't. Most of the city school funds come from the state, but at least 20% of the budget comes from the city. If the mayor really wanted to see something different happen, he would say, I have to put this money forward, but I'm not going to put this money forward until you put forward a plan for how you're going to get from where you are to where you should be.
And what is that plan?
Well, that's kind of why the CEO gets $500,000 to figure out, isn't it? That's her job to figure out. So until she does that job, those funds will be held in escrow. Kind of like when you pay rent and you have repairs that need to be done and you go to court and the judge says, okay, we're going to hold that money in escrow.
But you're assuming she knows. By the results, generally, she doesn't.
Then she should not be here collecting $500,000.
That is the whole point. The mayor, for some reason, will not find someone who's willing to get dirty to change this trajectory that you're talking about.
But you have to understand, the mayor comes from this system. The mayor came through the school system. The mayor understands how the schools work or don't work. He's gotten desensitized to it because he grew up in it. He will tell you he's a child of Baltimore that's never left Baltimore. That means all you know is broken and you've never seen a solution. So you can't expect him to find what he's never seen.
You got to have a conscience to see what's happening to these kids. It's so debilitating. It's criminal.
So we need leaders to be passionate about this issue. We've got kids, we've got families that have no way out. This is a third world system in a first world country that demands strong leadership and structural change to fundamentally alter the trajectory we've been on for decades.
Governor?
Well put. Yeah, but again, I'm going back to the macro. The nonprofits.
Exactly.
There's a role for everybody here. This is not just one guy with one app.
That's right.
Yeah, it's great journalism, but it's way more. It's more complicated. It's more simple. It's those PTA meetings, those nonprofits, and your point's well taken. A lot of parents may not be there, or don't have the aptitude. There are ways to fill that hole to get these kids.
But she's saying they don't have access to that information and how to access those organizations to get the help.
Well, that's so fundamental, so easy to write.
Yes.
So it's not.
I don't understand how parents cannot, when you see the dismal failure.
I don't know about just parents being there. We raise 4 children. There's a certain amount of homework you expect to come home. There's a certain amount of time you're going to expect to look at it to see if it's done. Whether you know it's correct or not, to see if it's done.
So when you say we, it sounds like there were 2 parents in the household.
Yes.
Yeah, that's important also.
That's part of it. That's a big part of it. Yeah. We got a lot of broken families in the city. We have a lot of single head of household families in the city. One of the things that needs to happen here in Baltimore is to take a realistic view of what's happening in the city, what has happened, what we want to see happen, and how to get there. One of the first things that needs to happen, and that leadership can take control of, is creating a community school model that actually works, so that you're educating the child, getting them to where they need to be with proficiency, and you're educating the parent to be able to get them where they need to be to economically improve their entire family situation. We need a community school model that actually works with folks that want to see change in the city.
Hold your fire, go by now. Hold your fire. We're coming back. The latest round of Maryland State test scores is now telling the whole story about student outcomes. We're taking a deeper look at what is and is not included in that data when we return.
Was MSDE in violation of federal law prior to March with the way the data was being reported?
MSDE was not in violation of federal law.
Then why was the data changed?
Because we're applying, we have a new test, and we have shifting end sizes.
So, how much do parents really know about Maryland and public schools? There are at least 200 schools across the state where, according to the state's data, the percentage of students proficient in math is 0.5% or less. That's tens of thousands of students, Baltimore and Maryland, who may not be able to do math. Balance a checkbook, but because of a change in how the Department of Education reports students' test scores, taxpayers may never know.
The state education department is instituting a cover-up of what's going on in public schools. Is that outrage?
For more than 10 years, MSDE redacted test scores one way. But earlier this year, the state enacted what is called enhanced de-identification, which expanded the redactions by replacing much of the test score data with asterisks, the state says, to protect student privacy.
I think it's absolutely absurd to use children and privacy.
Parents and taxpayers like Desmond Stinney, a Baltimore City father of 3, aren't buying that argument. Stinney believes if the test scores were better, the state wouldn't be hiding them.
I would imagine if it were reversed and 89% of folks were exceeding the expectations, we would probably have a lot more transparency and insight as to what's really happening.
You know, we've been so involved in crisis in the classroom for a few years now, and as much as we've covered Baltimore, for me as the moderator today, I did not know it was this bad. So this is the question I need to ask everyone. Where are the accountable adults? Governor.
Many in office comfortably, and they'll get reelected. And you can run 50,000 of these shows, and they'll still be reelected. So, but what I don't like today, it's not. Transparency is important, but if we had complete transparency, we'd still be here saying the same thing, believe me. And the other observation I have to make is, we talked about on the break, we talk about parents. Let's be real. A lot of these kids don't have parents in the home. We're talking about accountable adults. So I'm not talking about mom and dad, I'm talking about some accountable adult that's going to require this child to do his or her work that night. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's next door neighbor. And sometimes it has to be. So, again, we can run, the system's flawed, not enough people care, not enough parents are showing up. It has to start with the PTAs, it has to.
You know, Pastor Wright, we talked a little about this earlier, but I want to come back to students' performance based on the soundbite we heard a minute or so ago. If students are coming out of Baltimore City schools and they are functionally illiterate, how can they ever be expected to be productive members of our society?
They can't, and that's the problem. So when you see children that leave a Baltimore City school with a piece of paper that says they know a certain amount of stuff, of education, of facts, and they manage to get into a college based on that and get there, and then need 1.5 years of remedial training as they realize all that they didn't learn in the city. And one of the other things that's really scary to me about this whole education system and the 13 schools with 0 proficiency, in Maryland, a lot of the vocational technical programs are run through the high schools. One of the biggest, and this is the first time I'm saying this, so fact check me please, folks. One of the biggest vocational technical skill centers is based out of Edmondson West Side, I believe it is. For the second time on that list of zero proficient students. So when you look at some of the medical vocational training programs, okay, that are based at these schools with students with zero proficiency, when these students come out thinking that they're prepared, in some cases knowing that they're not, it leads into why we are also having the economic crisis and the job market crisis we're having. Because for some of these fields, you actually have to pass a test. And you're not equipped to pass that test when you leave these high schools with that piece of paper, but with zero proficiency.
General, is school choice one of the answers?
School choice is absolutely one of the answers. And let me go back to the data. When we have school systems that obscure the horrible nature of what is going on here in Baltimore and to some extent throughout Maryland, then now parents, leaders don't get as incensed as they should. And the only way that we're going to see structural change, like parent choice, like a parent bill of rights, is for every news station and every leader in this state and above to be so angry at us failing our students and our families that they demand something fundamentally different from what we've experienced for the last several decades. But it starts with understanding that it is a crisis, and until we embrace the data that proves it, and we get parents and adults in the room that demand change, then we're not going to see those fundamental structural changes that our students need.
A riddle, Governor. So you're saying that people will continue to vote for the Brandon Scotts of the world and others that don't deliver for their children in education. Is it because they don't understand what their policies are and what it does to their children in the long run? Why would you continue to vote for something that is destructive to the overall well-being of not only your child, but your community for generations to come? What is it we're missing here?
I'm not going to single out Mayor Scott.
I said it.
This goes back.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
I said it. You didn't say it. I said it.
It's all the above.
But why? Why would they continue voting for them?
Because the status quo is really comfortable. The status quo.
I'm talking about the voter, though. I'm talking about why would the voter? They don't realize what it is.
Status quo is really comfortable. Who wants a disruptor? You want to come in? You want a disruptor to come in and disrupt?
When it's not working for you?
What's that?
When it's not working for your child? When you see the results in these test scores? You want to continue that?
Well,
you're willing to deal with this?
I'm a realist.
To destroy your child to keep the status quo in place?
I'm a realist. I look back at the last 6 decades, and that's the conclusion I'm driven now. There's some great people to my right here who care. There's other people who care. I'm not saying nobody cares. I'm saying not enough people care. Not enough people care to change. And I'm talking about elected Republicans. My God, I live in the real world here in Baltimore. But I'm talking about showing up in city council hearings and getting in someone's face politely and saying, I'm going to be here until my school changes.
But I'm asking you something different. Shannon, why they continue to vote for people that are not delivering and they continue to just dismal results? Why?
Because they know them.
Oh.
Because they know them. Yes. But see, whether I know, I'm trying to say this in a nice way. So I'm just going to put it out there, and glad my mother's not watching. Sometimes the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. Now, I may not agree with your policies, but you've been here. You're from the hood. You've been through this hood. You know what it's like. You know what the struggle is like. The problem with that hood mentality, and folks, when I say it, when I talk about the hood mentality, please understand. My mother was 19 when I was born, single. We lived with my grandparents in the projects. The only difference in the way I sound today and the way we hear a lot of folks sounding is my mother finally got the understanding that education was the key out of the projects and poverty. So don't get it twisted. Now, back to that. I know you because you from the same hood. I don't know them, so I don't know what they stand for. I may not like all of what you stand for, but I understand where you're coming from. And that mentality is a lot of what keeps folks hamstrung in the city, and not just Baltimore, in all of our cities. Mm-hmm. Because you have to understand that when you grow up in the hood, when you grow up in the projects, when you grow up in extreme poverty, you don't trust what other folks that don't know your situation, that they really have your best interest at heart. You know, this brother over here, he came from the same 2 blocks over in the same hood. So I'm gonna trust him before I trust this person over here that sounds like they might have a degree, but I don't know what they're talking about.
Bianca, you now homeschool your children. We know a lot of parents would love to pull their students out of the city school system like you did, and it worked, but don't have the time or resources to do so. Talk to us about how you made that decision and your message to parents who may be considering homeschooling their children.
Sure. I first want to say that I'm an immigrant from El Salvador. So how did this 10-year-old who came from a civil war in El Salvador, 1982, learn English in 18 months? Proficient enough to pass 5th grade, successfully, by the way, pass, not D's, F's, successfully pass elementary, middle, high school, and then be accepted to Maryland Institute College of Art. This is not bragging on me, it's on my parents. My parents had the standards, high standards. They were there and they required, they asked. And I know that's not the case for many Baltimoreans. I know that. I know that's not the case. However, as far as for homeschool, we have now the highest numbers. Homeschool office reported to me last week that they have now 2,500 students. This is the highest that it has ever been. The issue is that the parent is, or the accountable adult, sometimes is a legal guardian, sometimes is an aunt or a grandparent who has said, I am going to find a curriculum, I am going to invest the time, and believe me, for the 5 hours, which is required for a homeschool family, 5 hours to homeschool your child per the day, there's the rest of the hours that I work part-time, 3 positions to be able to do this. This is not the easy position, or the easy decision, I should say, but my position is to make sure that my son, who is an advanced learner, is not bored in school, which is what we have found. Also, when you are behind, you can do the summer or extend the summer, or the school year into the summer, but it doesn't cost anything more than what it would be. We're spending now $24,000. That is not what I'm paying, by the way, to homeschool. It's $120 per month.
You know, homeschooling is such a huge sacrifice. You know, General, if we continue down this path, you know, you spent time in third world countries. If we continue this and we don't find the accountable adults, which could be anyone, it could be your older brother, your older sister, as long as you're accountable to make sure that person gets an education. And Shannon Wright said something that's important. It's not just here in Baltimore, it's across the country. If this doesn't change, what does America become?
No, so Armstrong, you're exactly right that what's going on in Baltimore is much like what I saw deployed recently to Baghdad, Iraq. That should horrify us. And maybe the biggest crisis isn't just that we're failing, but we feel hopeless, that there's no way out of this cycle. But there are models out there that have succeeded. Often they go back to school choice. Often they go back to Parents' Bill of Rights. Often they go back to evidence-based schooling decisions. And we see that there are places that have seen success, and we need to cling to those evidence-based models instead of just wringing our hands and recognizing not only are we failing, but burdening our population with the belief that there is no hope.
If you could advise the state legislature, the school system, or the mayor of things that you should implement right away to start this slow progress to really empowering kids with a real quality education, what would you recommend, Governor?
First of all, Shannon, I love what you said. I love what you said. All of you. It's just right on. The answer is go down to Annapolis, not just on every Monday night. That's when people come down. State legislature. Monday night, everybody has their sides. Go down there Tuesday night. Go down there Wednesday night. Show up at the committee meeting. Go to the city hall meeting. Show up. Demand. Politely demand. We're not going to stand for this. The status quo doesn't work. Too many kids, too many generations we've lost. Go to the juvenile facilities. And I got a good idea for your next show, by the way. Go to the community college presidents in Maryland and let them tell you what kind of kids they're getting from the public schools and the fact they have to do all the remedial stuff for the first year. That'll bring you back time and time again. So again, it comes down to sort of a populist theme, local school board meetings, PTAs, city council, showing up, screaming bloody murder, not going to take it anymore. Not going to take it anymore.
And don't go anywhere. Our conversation about the failures in some Maryland schools and the impact on students continues after this.
These kids can't do math. You're not preparing them to buy groceries. You're not preparing them to do accounting, to count their own money. You're not preparing them to read contracts and negotiate salaries. Are we expecting these kids to kill off themselves? I mean, we see the number of teen shootings happening just this year. What jobs are we preparing these kids for? That's the future.
What about the curriculum, Shannon Wright? We haven't even gotten into that yet. What's coming down the pipe?
A whole bunch of stuff that doesn't make any sense. You've got schools now, we've got curriculum, we've got programming where, do you know that the children in school today do not know how to sign their names? We don't do script. We don't do penmanship. We don't do basic things to give you basic life skills to be able to function after you get outside that building.
So, we just heard Giovanni Patterson. He filed a lawsuit, which Ben Crump became a part of. He's a father who's suing the school system for allegedly depriving children of the right to a good education. Do you believe, General, the failures of Baltimore public schools are a civil rights issue?
I think it's an issue for national security, for economic vitality, and civil rights. You look at disparate outcomes in places like Baltimore that are failing the population here, and we recognize that there needs to be something fundamentally done for national competitiveness, but also to live up to the equality that our citizens should demand.
Governor Early, we've heard calls for the Baltimore City school system to be investigated for possible criminal wrongdoing. If you were governor today, knowing what you know, would you ask law enforcement, whether it be the state's attorney or, let's say, the state prosecutor, to investigate the school system?
Of course, but I wouldn't pretend that would be the bottom line to what is going to fix everything either. And if I can just add one point we haven't made today, often we talk about responsible adults, it's coaches. You can reach kids through athletics. That's why I'm a former jock and all that, but I believe in that. So, and sometimes coaches work. Coaches demand, what we love about athletics? Accountability. You demand accountability of your players. So that's part of this puzzle, and I wanted to bring that up.
Shannon, you previously led a local NAACP chapter. Now, the Maryland chapter, NAACP, urged school leadership this year to address a, quote, intolerable situation for black students. Is this the new concern, or do you feel Maryland schools have consistently failed to meet black students' needs?
So obviously there's a failure.
I don't want to reduce it to race, but it does disproportionately impact them more than anyone else. You can't ignore it.
So you mentioned the NAACP. I was a part of a team that led a settlement, a lawsuit for $1.3 million against the state of New York for poor performance and poor outcomes based on poor structure of schools in New York. Okay, that's the same thing that could be done here, and I find it interesting that you don't want to look at race because dumb knows no color. Let's be real clear on that. And I'm gonna say this in a whole bunch of ways.
And intelligence knows no color.
There you go. Now, you can either be special and allow this to continue because you don't know any better, or you can be special and allow this to continue because you want to continue to be in office. But there are different levels of lack of accountability that have been here in Baltimore City and cities around the country for a long, long time. This city needs a leader that's willing to say, I understand this is the money I have to release, but I'm not going to until you show me your blueprint for actually getting these kids proficient. This is a city that needs a leader that says, okay, police department, you know that the schools are broken, that we have single-headed family households, that these children are not supervised until you have an actual program that shows me what you're going to do to help transition these youth back in the direction they need to go. We're not increasing your budget either. We need leadership in this city that's going to stand up to each of its own department heads and say, no, not until you show me how it's going to work. Make it make sense. We don't have that kind of leadership in this city.
Be a disruptor. Disrupt the status quo.
Exactly. Exactly.
Bianca, you are a former Baltimore teacher. We've heard from teachers on our previous Crisis in the Classroom panels that there was pressure to put kids through the system, even if they weren't ready. Your thoughts in about 40 seconds?
I've seen it. I've seen it. It sounded like he said this, check. It is heartbreaking. I wasn't ever part of a union, and I'm not going to speak to which school. However, when you focus more on the social emotional learning, like General said, this is not just a risk to national. How about the health? How about when we saw that the virtual unlearning that happened during the pandemic, kids became so depressed. We are not to be meant to be in this bubble.
And we've seen all across the country the results of placing kids in this bubble after being told by so many it would not work. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But I want to thank all of you from the bottom of my soul for joining us, for caring about this crisis in the classroom and being a part of this town hall. Remember, you can buy the book, Crisis in the Classroom, written by myself, Dr. Carson, and Ben Crump, wherever you find books sold, and on Amazon.com. On behalf of our terrific panel and crew here, I'm Armstrong Williams in Baltimore. We'll see you next time. Okay, wait 1 second, let me do this.